Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin. And today I've got Danny Maloney with me. And Danny Maloney is the CEO and co-founder of a business called Tailwind. And I love the name of it. Tailwind is a really cool name. If you're riding a bike, you know that a tailwind is going to help you get where you're going a lot faster. If you're in a plane, it's the same thing. But what Tailwind does is gives over 1.5 million businesses worldwide the marketing team that they need through AI. And it's the type of AI that helps you draft ad campaigns and posts so that you can just do what you need to do with a marketing space in a lot less time. Now, it's an interesting topic because AI is all over the show. Everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's trying to figure it out and to really understand whether it's going to change the world as we know it or whether it's going to just help us do what we need to do much more efficiently. Prior to founding Tailwind, Danny spent a number of years working at Google and YouTube on new product initiatives like Street View and the YouTube Creators Program, things you've probably heard of. And then he's also worked on the turnaround team at AOL after it spun off of Time Warner. And I think that's fascinating because that's a whole space that's just got its own dimension to it. So I just wanted to say, welcome to the podcast, Danny, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jay. It's a pleasure.
So you've got quite an interesting background. You've worked at places where we've all heard of some of these things, and it's just, wow, it would have been fascinating to go down that rabbit hole of what was like, all that sort of stuff. But today we want to focus a little bit more on where you've come from to where you've gotten to today. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Absolutely. So if I go way back in my background, I grew up with a father who was a small business owner. And so I think my interest in entrepreneurship really started at a young age by at least seeing parts of what he went through in terms of running his own business and building it over time. And on occasion, he'd have me working in the warehouse, putting together products and things like that. So I got to see firsthand what it was like. I actually started my first company when I was in school. I was studying engineering and business, the intersection of the two. And it was during the rise of eBay to date, but during the rise of e-commerce marketplaces as a concept. And I started an e-commerce business back then. It was based off of personal passion. I learned pretty quickly, probably by about the age of 21 or 22, that I did not know how to scale a company. It was a very valuable experience, very humbling. And so I went towards working in bigger companies for what I thought would be 2 or 3 years before I tried my hand at entrepreneurship again, turned into more like a decade. But I was having a lot of fun getting to work on a very wide variety of different types of projects and challenges. And as you mentioned, working on products that were impacting a lot of people's lives and that I truly fundamentally believed in. So I stayed longer than I thought I would, but eventually got to the point where I said, you know what, I really want to go the entrepreneurial path. It's only going to get harder the longer I wait. I met my co-founder, Alex, who was in a similar spot in his life. And we made the crazy decision to leave our big corporate jobs and go do it. That was a number of years ago at this point. Even the journey of Tailwind has had multiple chapters. We actually started out working on a concept together that was in the online wedding space. So totally different business. And through that, we hit on some early tactics. The visual social space really worked for us for marketing. And we began to actually see our content go viral and build a consumer audience. And after failing to figure out the business model for the wedding business, we eventually came back and said, okay, we've built something interesting here. It could probably help other businesses. Why don't we go explore what's happening with the web becoming more visual and the need for marketing technology that supports that. And that set us on a very different path, but one that eventually led to Tailwind.
It's fascinating. I'm curious. So you're talking about doing a bit of a pivot, and we can talk about the pivot side of it for a long time, because that's a very essential and important part of an entrepreneurial journey, knowing when to pivot. And it's interesting to me that you said you failed to figure out the business model, and that's interesting too. But I just want to come back to just that time frame around when you're realizing that this valuable thing that you've created, even though you couldn't figure out the business model, you ended up with something that was useful. Mm-hmm. Was that well before when AI started to go viral, or was it after?
Yes, that was well before. So we've had two big pivots in our journey as a company. The first one was from consumer-focused wedding industry online business, where the idea was, oh, wouldn't it be great if people could look at real photos from weddings, select what they like, and then plan their wedding that way? And lo and behold, fast forward 2 years and Pinterest becomes one of the fastest growing websites ever. And we saw, oh, people are doing this, but they're doing it on Pinterest. And that's probably a better solution. And so that put us, I think, in the general marketing technology direction, where we began to explore the needs of different types of businesses. We really struck a chord with small businesses. It was very meaningful for both of us based on personal life experience and experience within our families building and running small businesses. And so we wanted to focus on the needs of small business owners and entrepreneurs. We actually went multiple years down building an earlier version of Tailwind, which had nothing to do with AI at all. And so it was predominantly a social scheduling and publishing product that actually got a good bit of notoriety, grew for a while, but it was probably late 2018 to early 2019. We saw that social was fundamentally changing. And the strategies that worked at that time were not going to continue working in the future, largely because social networks were becoming more of walled gardens that were pay for play and pay for traffic. And there was just going to be less free organic traffic to be had. And so we began thinking at that point, how would we pivot this product again to serve what our members' needs are 5 years from now instead of today? And what we hit on was we had to guide people towards omni-channel marketing. That was going to be a big problem for small businesses because we're limited on time, bandwidth, knowledge of additional channels. All of that takes time to ramp up on. And so how do we potentially accelerate that process? We're going to have to automate a lot more of it. How do we possibly automate something so complex? Generative AI was really in its infancy at that point compared to where it is today. But we began building tools in that direction of generating content for people, visual content, helping people generate the right hashtags to use and things of that nature. And we got really positive signals as we began rolling out a completely new version of Tailwind that was multi-platform, that is really driven by these types of features. And that was the signal for us of, okay, this is the right direction. Let's focus on what we internally called Tailwind 2.0. And we're going to build a whole new version of Tailwind that's about helping small business everywhere with their marketing within the limited time and budget that they have. And that's what led us to where we are today.
It's really interesting. I like that the phrasing, everywhere they should be within their budget, because a lot of times businesses, they're out there thinking they have to be everywhere. And in actual fact, you're not moving the needle at all with some of the stuff that you do. I look at my own sort of efforts in some of the social media spaces and I think, why did I even bother with that? It's just, I don't need to be there. Either my audience isn't there or somehow it's just not meeting the needs that they have. I'm curious, from a business perspective, it's obviously been a multi-year journey. How did you fund the building up of your ideas and your actual software as you were doing it?
Multiple chapters there. So initially it was bootstrapping in the early days, and I put in some initial capital as we were getting going. Then we had some great angel investors who, when we think about that chapter of building the first version of Tailwind that was not related to AI, supported us through that period to the point where we were able to get to profitability and then build the business profitably and bootstrap again after we had that support. And then for the more recent chapter where we did pivot towards AI and this multi-channel solution, we needed a lot more capital to be able to do that. And so at that point, we did join up and partner with a growth equity firm who put more capital into the business. And that capital enabled us to make the pretty large scale R&D efforts that we had to make, as well as some acquisitions we've made along the way in order to get this product to market as quickly as we have. Without that support, I don't think we could have done it. So they've been a critical partner for us, but they were willing to invest and take that journey because we had shown with the first version of Tailwind, we were able to scale a business to a certain point. And they were really, I think, betting on the team more than anything else that we would be able to do it again with the next model.
I want to ask a follow-up question about that. And you've given a bit of an answer to it already, but in terms of that whole process of going out and getting funding from an angel investor. For somebody who's listening and they're thinking, I'd do that, I've not done it before, what do I have to do to get ready for it? What did you do to get ready for reaching out to angel investors and starting to ask them to open their wallet and share their money?
And thinking back, there are probably more resources today that are available than there were at that time. But there was a lot that I had to do. Right? I thought it was going to be a lot easier and a lot faster than it was. And everyone tells you that. Even with having worked at larger companies and having a lot of contacts in the industry, it took a long time in order to raise that seed funding. I think some of the biggest things I had to do was, frankly, just get over the hump of starting to reach out to people and have conversations, because I did not predict the majority of the rejection reasons that I was going to get for why people were not interested. But every time you have one of those conversations, you take the rejection, you learn why. Now you're ready to handle that rejection, or at least that potential reason for a rejection, better the next time. And it really helps you tighten your story. I think the other really critical thing as you're beginning that process is really listening to the feedback. It doesn't mean you have to jump on every piece of feedback, but when you start hearing certain things consistently that might be pointing out risks or holes in your business model, or just areas where you need additional proof and data to convince people that you're onto something, you can then shift what you focus on day to day, either by yourself or as a team, and get that data, get that proof. And what we saw was, as we did that, the story got stronger and stronger until eventually someone said, yes, we will write you a check. And then once you get that first yes, it's a lot easier to get other yeses. The first one is the hardest by far. So I think that's really, for me at least, the biggest thing to get over the hump on was the fear of rejection and getting out there and just actually starting to have these conversations. The other thing I will say, and this isn't an option for everyone, but if you do have a team working on the business together, it's a huge advantage, both because investors like investing in teams and they think businesses are going to have a greater chance of success if it's a team of founders as opposed to an individual founder. But the other thing is, when I've been in fundraising mode in those different periods, it legitimately becomes 70-80% of my job and my time. And so if you're spending that much of your time for many months on fundraising in order to do it well, who's actually building and running the business? So you've got to have a team working together where some people are doing the building and advancing the business, and then someone is in charge of the fundraising. But I think those would be my key pieces of advice to get it done.
That's really important information to know, especially the point about the team side of things, because if you do have to spend most of your time as the founder, if you're out there finding the money and you're not there to lead your team, I'm curious, how long did it take you from the time you decided, hey, I'm going to actually start looking for money to help us grow, until you actually got that first check? How long did it take?
I think it was probably north of a year for the seed funding. And part of that was the first pivot moving, because we started the fundraising process pitching the wedding business and got a whole lot of rejections for very good reasons on that particular business. And then once we pivoted and understood what the pivot was, we did our customer development research and we started getting people actually giving us credit cards to pay for this product and so on and so forth. Then we were able to pick up steam again on the fundraising with the new model, which was the first version of Tailwind. So because of that pivot happening in that time frame, I'd say it was probably like 15 to 18 months total. But the pivot probably happened, I don't know, 6 months in. And without that pivot, maybe it would have been closer to a year, maybe 9 months if we got lucky. But it really does matter what stage of development your business is at when you're going for seed funding. A lot of people think they're ready and they're going to get feedback that they're not ready. And what I will say is, by the time we actually got money into the business, I believe we were doing at least a few $100,000 a year in revenue. It wasn't that we were just pitching an idea and a prototype and people wrote us a check. We were able to show over multiple months, multiple quarters of engaging with specific investors, a continued trend of more sales, more revenue coming in, continuing to advance the product and add functionality. And that built a track record with them that gave them greater confidence to actually invest in this.
That's really interesting because I was going to ask that at what stage is it important to have your organization or your business at break even point or profit making, or can you still reach out for money when you're still in that scrappy, you're on the runway trying to get to break even? And you said that impacted the willingness to provide money. Did that
Mhm.
impact a lot on that, or was it if you had been on the scrappy still building up towards break even stage, would it have been
Yeah,
hard?
it definitely would have been harder. I think for that stage, there are programs like incubator and accelerator programs that are great for that stage and can help you get at least some funding. It isn't as large of a check size you're asking for. But once we started having the conversations around that seed stage check, which for us ended up being $1.25 million. So a meaningful amount, but it wasn't $50,000 of funding and it wasn't 5 million or 10 million of funding. The investors we spoke to actually told me directly, okay, I'm interested in your story. I'm interested in where you're headed. Go show us that you can actually build some momentum here. And if you come back and build some more momentum, then we'll be much more interested. And it was almost a challenge that, again, I wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to be much easier. And okay, I worked at this company and that company. And of course, I've done it. I've worked on these huge products before. And that wasn't enough because, frankly, I think the investors understood better than I did at that point that there is a huge difference between building something from nothing and getting momentum when the entire world is engineered to prevent that from happening, and building a new product at a company like Google and getting it to 100 million users. It's infinitely easier to do the latter because the company already has the reach, the user base, the distribution mechanisms, and there's 17 different corporate functions you're being supported by while you're doing it that you don't even realize they're all there. That was part of my personal rude awakening in the early days. And it was humbling is, oh no, this is actually a different challenge. It's harder in many ways than what I've done in the past. And I think that's why they say you need to be a certain level of insane to actually start a business, because the odds of success are actually quite low. And the safer, higher expected value outcome is always to do something else.
Go get a paycheck from somebody else.
Yeah.
Exactly. Two quick questions. In terms of the person who eventually ended, or organization the angel investor that ended up writing the check, was that based off a one meeting thing where you met them, pitched, and they said yes, or was it built up as a relationship over time?
It was built up as a relationship over time. I don't remember how many meetings. It was many more than one, I'd say. And a lot of that was that they weren't, frankly, very familiar with the space that we were in. And so I had to find ways to explain what we were doing and why it mattered to people who didn't necessarily understand the world that we were living in and the industry that we were living in. But once they got it, they understood the fundamental value that was there, leaned in and said, this is interesting. And in our case, it was actually one lead investor that was an organization, a seed fund that's local here in Oklahoma and has a dual objective of making investment returns and also economic development. But then about half of the round came from friends, family, and angel investors. And part of their deal was also, okay, we will write half of the check, but we're only going to give it to you if you can raise the other half. And so you have to prove that you can convince other people that this is a good idea, and then we'll be happier to write the check as well.
That's a really interesting model. That I'm curious as to how you managed to sustain your sense of potential future success through that whole period.
I think there was just a deep rooted belief. We saw the opportunity, and we had experienced it, right? So even though the bridal business that we were building didn't really pan out, we were able to prove to ourselves that there was a great opportunity at that point in time for businesses to lean into visual social with the growth of Pinterest and Instagram and Tumblr back then as well, in order to dramatically accelerate their reach and awareness. So we knew that opportunity was there. We had spoken to many small business owners in different countries, in different industries, who were all interested in this, who were willing to pay for solutions, and who were really excited about it. So I think on our end, we were convinced that there was a there, right? And it was just a question of how do we unlock the opportunity to deliver this value for the world, right? So that's the founder passion that I think drives you through these difficult times. it almost makes it not feel like work for me, right? When I'm really excited about what I'm doing, then I can go hours and feel like I'm working. It feels like you're almost playing a game that's really exciting, because every time you get a really good customer testimonial, or every time you can actually see in the data that people are getting results, or you have a team member who achieves a professional milestone or whatever it might be, it's just fueling you with these good emotions and reasons to keep pushing on and trying to get more and more of that.
And you've got to have that deep-seated belief that something's going to work. Otherwise, you're just self-sabotaging yourself all the time, I
Yeah.
think. So let's talk a little bit about the Tailwind and the concept that it's built on. Tell us a little bit about how Tailwind works. If I was to sign up to Tailwind, how would that work? What would be the sort of leap forward that I would get in terms of my marketing?
There's a little bit of a choose your own adventure element to it, because we do have multiple pieces of functionality. I'll run through them really quickly to give you a sense of what the options are. So we've got Tailwind Copilot, which leverages AI to actually build a marketing plan for you. And so a lot of small businesses don't know what they should be doing to market. They don't know how to develop a marketing plan, but they feel they need one. And so we've built a process where you answer some everyday language questions that anyone can answer about their business, or at least take a guess at. And based on those inputs, our engine will then say, okay, here's a starting marketing plan. And together, we're going to go down this path. We're going to help you learn how to create content regularly, how to lean into what's working and what's not working, and then improve results as you go. So that's one option. You build the plan because you need that jump start to get going. If you already feel like you know what you're doing, you have your plan, then you get into the other parts of Tailwind. And part of the suite is focused on creating content and doing that much more effectively and efficiently. We have Tailwind Ghostwriter, which is the copywriting component of that, where we serve over 50 different marketing use cases, so social use cases, email use cases, drafting video scripts, drafting entire articles and blog posts, or working through a process to get there, and so on and so forth. So a lot of different things that you can do with it. Then we have Tailwind Create, which is the visual creation component, where you upload your images, you add what you want your taglines, your sub tagline, your CTA, et cetera, to be, your brand colors. And we basically take those elements and design an endless stream of design treatments for you that are already pre-applied. So it's not like a tool like Canva where you have to go template by template and add things and edit them and figure out if you like it or not, and then maybe go to another template. We're drafting many options. So all you have to do is scroll, pick the ones you like. There's some really simple one-touch edits and tweaks that you can do. And then it'll automatically resize them for the different channels and the networks that you might want to use them on. So that's Tailwind Create, the visual creation tool. And then we've got the distribution piece, which is the organic social scheduling and publishing is still there. It's not as prominent as it was in the past for us. We have an email product as well for email marketing that you can do it all in one place and get some nice synergies there. And then the newest piece is Tailwind Ads, which isn't technically public yet, but it's in a private beta that's getting larger by the day. But Tailwind Ads actually create the entire ad campaign for you based on a similar type of process. So you get the creative, which you can always edit, change however you like, choose which ads to use or not use, and so forth. But then the other piece that we have from a company that we acquired last year is an AI-driven spend optimization tool, which will actually let you just put in a budget for the month and then optimize how that budget is spent across your various creative and campaigns in order to drive your objective as efficiently as possible. So those are the major components.
Sorry, quick question about that. Can you hook them up to Google Search, Facebook, or YouTube, all different ad platforms?
The company Nectar9 that we acquired supported many ad platforms. There's some work we have to do to integrate each platform that we want to support within Tailwind. So we started with Meta as the first integration. We're in the process of now enabling the Google integration, and that should be ready sometime before the end of the year. So those will be the first two channels. And then after that, it's likely Pinterest, TikTok are probably up next for what our customers are asking for the most. But the vision for the product and what the technology can actually do already is not allocate dollars across creative and across campaigns, but also across channels. And it can update that essentially in real time throughout the day based on performance data. And so that's really the bigger vision. Okay, maybe you have 4 or 5 ad channels connected to Tailwind. You give us one monthly budget, and it becomes our job to help you spend that money in the most efficient way possible. And it might be a different mix by channel from one month to the next. It doesn't always have to be the same thing, because what we see, especially in small businesses, people tend to set up ad campaigns and then forget about them and just let them run. And maybe they'll come back in a month, maybe 2 weeks to check them out. And then if you do want to go through the work of optimizing them, we hear, oh my God, these dashboards are terrible and they're so confusing and so complex. So abstracting out that math for people makes the process a lot easier, and just an overall simplified process where people can run their business instead of having to learn to become ad optimizers, which isn't why most small business owners get into entrepreneurship. They get into it because they're passionate about something else. And so we're getting a really strong positive response to that, and building some really interesting case studies in terms of uplift and so forth. But sorry, to come back to your question, I think the answer is someone can start where they want to start. If they're just about, I already have content, I want to schedule it, publish it, I'll be able to see it on my calendar and do that for multiple networks, they can start there. If they need help with the visual design, they can start with Create. If they want to start with ads, soon they'll be able to start with the ads product. If they want to start building a marketing plan with Copilot, they can start there. But we try to guide them to what the different options are so they can then pick whatever makes sense for where they're at the moment.
That's really fascinating. To me, I think there's a few elements there that sort of stand out. One is, if you're someone who's good with words, but not with the creative visual elements, having something that's going to help you with that side of things based on the AI's ability to read the algorithm and adjust based on what it's learning, because that's the whole point of AI. It learns really quickly what's working, what's not. That could be a really big advantage. I wanted to just circle back to a thing that I've heard a lot of people express discomfort with, and that's in terms of the visual images, copyright, and all that sort of stuff. How do you actually make sure that people know that they've got the legitimate legal ability to use what's been created?
In our case, there's multiple possible answers to this. For Tailwind Create and that product, we're actually taking people's own images in raw photography, and then we're doing the design treatments around it. So they're actually telling us, yes, I have the right to use these photos. We do offer the feature similar to a DALL-E, Midjourney, or those types of products. We do have a feature where people can experiment with just generating raw AI images there. To be frank, it's not all that heavily used. So it's there, but I think what people are realizing is most of those types of tools and capabilities don't yet create images that are really tailored for marketing purposes. Like, they can make some beautiful digital art and fun experiments and exercises, but for the most part, it's not there yet to just create the image you need out of thin air. And if, let's say, you have physical products you're selling, you can't misrepresent the product. At some point, you're going to have to take photography. And we haven't found a way to completely remove the photography element yet. We do have stock image libraries that are licensed and things of that nature that people can use if they need to. But that's how we're managing it at the moment. Frankly, we're just not pushing so far in that direction where it becomes a significant risk.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds fascinating. It sounds like it could potentially be a little bit of a useful tool. And it just depends on what people need and how comfortable they are with that AI space. One of the things that sort of sprang to mind when you were describing how you get the information into AI in order to be able to create the stuff that's needed is that people are going to, and this is probably why you have your Copilot offering, people really need to know very clearly who they're wanting to attract and why, and what they want them to do once they've attracted them. So you've got to have some really good way of tracking the metrics, the analytics about what's working and what's not. And I would assume that's what comes back to the AI. You have to tell the AI, what are the conversion events? What's an event? What's a conversion action? All that sort of stuff.
The more of that data that's there, the better the AI can optimize for what you want to optimize for. And so that's really important. I think there's an interesting role AI is starting to play and can continue playing in actually helping people learn these things. For example, when people go through the Tailwind ad setup, we actually draft based on the fact that we know what their business is, their website, what type of business, and so forth. We will draft things like what we think their audience profile is or should be, because some people don't know. They don't know where to start, and you need a starting audience profile to target. But one of the things that I think we've realized over the years is done is better than perfect, right? And so a lot of people get held up on, I don't know exactly what the perfect audience is to be targeting. That's fine. Start with a good educated guess, start getting data back, and then let the technology help you learn. And over not just a short period of time, but over the years of building your business, continue to evolve your understanding of who your audience is. Maybe you have multiple potential audiences that you serve in the long term. And this type of automated analysis potentially supercharges that whole process by being able to see trends in the data that we with our human eyes will mostly miss, right? So it's really fascinating. There are other interesting use cases. You mentioned some people might not feel they're that strong with written word, others not so strong with visual design. One of the audiences that is intuitive in hindsight, we saw really took to the ghostwriter product were people who were not native English speakers, where maybe English was a second language, and the ability to generate higher quality, more grammatically correct copy was actually career changing for some of them, right? And now they can do a job maybe they couldn't have done as confidently before, or they can serve clients in new regions that they wouldn't have been able to serve. And that's pretty fascinating to me as well, because whenever these new technologies come up, you see these use cases that maybe you didn't predict initially, and they actually end up being massive when it comes to democratization of opportunity, economic opportunity, learning opportunity worldwide. I love that about technology.
That is absolutely fascinating. And I'm assuming that at some stage you'll flip it as well. And if people are native English speakers, but they're not native Spanish speakers or German speakers or French or Cantonese or Mandarin or whatever, you'll eventually be able to do it the other way around as well. That's fascinating.
We actually have people doing that already. So we don't advertise Ghostwriter as a tool in anything other than English. And we already see a pretty significant percentage of, I guess queries aren't the right word, but a significant percentage of sessions that are being conducted in languages other than English. And we're seeing strong feedback that people are liking the results they're getting in German, Dutch, or French, or whichever language it might be. And so that's almost keyed us into, okay, there's another need out there that our audience is telling us about, even if they're not telling us directly. And now, do we think about the way that Tailwind Create will resize images for different channels? Do we think about enabling you to select all the languages that you want to be marketing in? And whenever you generate a piece of copy, now it's generated in all those languages by default. And so you think about the multiplication there, and the time it would take, less time than it would take to build one piece of content. You've potentially now built 100 pieces of content, and it's a multilingual marketing campaign that goes on for multiple weeks. That's where it's fascinating to me, because that would have been completely impossible even 2 or 3 years ago. And now these are real things people are doing.
It's really interesting. Danny, thank you so much for being on the podcast. If people were interested in either reaching out to you and connecting with you or finding out more about Tailwind, where would they go?
So we are tailwindapp.com, tailwindapp.com. And I am Danny at tailwindapp.com. So I'm happy to be accessible. People can shoot me a note anytime, and they're welcome to look me up on whatever their favorite social network is. I'm on pretty much all of them. But generally, my handle is going to be Daniel P. Maloney or something very similar to it. So you'll know it's me.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trudy.